All right, good afternoon and welcome to our first Government of Canada Office 365 Council meeting of 2021. My name is Silvana Gatto and I'm so excited to invite all of you back. Happy New Year. I am the Director of Sales here at Orangutech, hosting our season 3 of these Government of Canada Council meetings. And we have a great presentation lined up today for all of you from Global Affairs Canada. Next slide. So it wouldn't be a council meeting if we didn't show these two pictures of where we came from. Look at the picture here on the left-hand side from our first council meeting back in June 2018, hosted at Treasury Board. There was 19 people around the table. You can see Julian on the right-hand side of the table there, who's presenting today, one of our founding members of the council meeting. 19 people around the table, about 10 different departments represented. Not long after, we moved the council meeting to the Microsoft Canada office downtown Ottawa, where month after month we had 80, 90, 100 plus people showing up to watch their peers present their story and their journey to Office 365. Next slide. All right, for anyone that is new to our council meetings, welcome. And for anyone that hasn't joined us for a few months, these meetings are set up to really give the opportunity to departments to share their story, share their journey to Office 365. And each month we have departments presenting on their implementation, their plans, their challenges, their lessons learned, their successes. All around moving to the cloud. And typically we host these meetings at the end of the month. We're planning at the end of February to have ISED present. We're just finalizing some details there and we will confirm with you guys shortly. Next slide. So as I mentioned, today we have a great presentation lined up from Global Affairs Canada. Julian Gusney, Director of Digital Strategy, is going to be presenting GAC's story and their journey to Office 365. As always, we will have a question and answer period at the end of the presentation. So if you have a question, please submit it in the Team Live chat. Please identify yourself. Anonymous questions may or may not get posted. If you see a question that you would like to get answered, vote for it, and we'll make sure that we move it to the top of the list to be answered, and we will do our best to get through as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation. I know that Julian has set up his presentation to really facilitate a great discussion, so feel free to jump in on that conversation. Without further ado, I will pass things over to Julian to get things started. Thanks.
Thank you, Silvana. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes, okay, great. First of all, really interesting showing the old photos back when we were all wearing work attire. So it's kind of is nice to see. I'm sure Banana Republic is taking a big hit right now. So thank you very much, first of all, for the opportunity to walk you through the global affairs journey with 365. We've been at this for a while, and there's been a lot of ups and downs, so we'll get into some of the meat there. But I just wanted to thank this council for inviting me here, so to give me the opportunity to present this today. Hopefully you find it interesting. I had invited my digital adoption lead, Romika Mukherjee, as well, but just giving us a live event. She was kind of the person stick handling a lot of our user engagement and communications, was a key resource in helping this. So worst case scenario, if we have any specific questions related to kind of the user engagement component, if I can't answer them today, we'll compile them and I'll be happy to get back to everybody because there's a lot to unpack. So again, thanks for having me. Can we go to the next slide, please, and thank you. All right. Oh, there we go. We can start with that one. So the objective of today is to really share the story of Global Affairs' journey to Microsoft 365, with the intention, I guess, highlighting some of the challenges that we experience, because it It was an international, sort of some key kind of international components that we'll unpack a bit and be able to talk about some of the takeaways that we encountered along the way. Essentially, we started our journey back in fiscal year 2017-18. Like many of you, it was mostly based on the fact that we had a lot of new client demand for SharePoint sites. They were steadily on the rise. We knew that SharePoint sprawl was a thing. We were really concerned about it, but we didn't really know how to tackle it. There was also a need within global affairs for greater collaboration in the missions. Many of our missions and our mission users and the business lines were, there was more and more push to be out in the field and to be able to collaborate and communicate from out in the field. A lot of the missions had their own unique cultures and were procuring their own collaboration solutions like WhatsApp and WeChat. And that provided kind of consistency and security challenges as well that we needed to address. And then lastly, there was an opportunity for us to start to quell the spread of Microsoft tenants within global affairs and look at things from a more managed way. So at the time, we knew 365 offered an ideal digital experience platform, which is essentially it's a consolidated suite of tools on a common managed platform. So we thought that this was a good opportunity to lean into setting that up for at enterprise scale. So at that time, of course, Microsoft were just, I think, pivoting away from that Office 365 and moving towards a rebranding of M365. Government of Canada was starting to mobilize around Microsoft 365. This council being a prime example. We're just trying to, figure things out and work together in partnership. SSC hadn't really come into the picture from an enterprise service perspective at that point. So all that to say is we got the green light to make it happen. And, we started our approach. We took a two-pronged approach initially. One was obviously to take a look at pilots. So starting small, doing some pilot implementations, learning from that, and as well taking it from more of a program lens, because we understood there was a lot of governance, policy, people, process, and technology essentially that we had to figure out if we were going to effectively deploy this. We did a lot of consultations with Microsoft, governments, other government departments to better understand the path of success. We, all the best practices, ours and ours. We even worked with Microsoft to perform a network assessment. So for us within global affairs, we have 178 missions in over 100 countries that we had to contend with. And we knew that network performance was going to be a challenge and a huge risk for us. So one of the first things we did was to perform a network assessment, which essentially confirmed that indeed international performance was going to be a challenge. In parallel, some of the pilots we did were on G7, and we leveraged our US mission network as well to do some focused pilots. They were mostly focused on producing SharePoint sites and working with some of the key champions in the field to really, unpack SharePoint and make sure that they had a good user experience. The pilots were conducted on a separate cloud tenant. That's important. So we didn't have integration with global affairs in the GC network at the time. But these pilots were really integral for us because they taught us a lot about the need for user adoption, the need for change management, the need for ops and support functions to be stood up, and it highlighted key dependencies related to kind of devices and network performance internationally. So that was a very useful exercise. Can we go to the next slide, please? So I think we'll get there. In terms of herding cats, there was a large gap initially in understanding between senior management. And I'm sure you guys have experienced the same thing where, many were on the impression this was simply a matter of whipping out a credit card at the time and handing out a bunch of licenses. Whereas on the boots on the ground, we were starting to realize the sheer complexity of being able to roll this out in an organizational context, in an enterprise scale around the globe. So in those early days, it was the type of thing where you just lifted a rock and all of a sudden there was 2 rocks underneath. So there was a lot of discovery that was happening. It brought a lot of questions to bear in terms of, what is our core product offering? We had that giant wheel of MS365 products, but where do we focus our energies? How do we address adoption and change management and user engagement? How are we going to govern this? How are we going to architect it? How can we support this properly? What are the new skill sets we need to develop, the new roles? Is this even going to work in some of the missions abroad? You know, we have a lot of, there was, I think, missions in Africa, we couldn't even stream at YouTube. So how was that going to respond if we threw Microsoft Teams at them? What about the security landscape? What level of security is required? We were starting fresh, like every other department, in terms of figuring out these things. What does this mean for our legacy systems? We had a lot of digital collaboration-esque and related type legacy systems that we knew that this could be an opportunity to rationalize downstream. How does this alter our document management plans, et cetera, et cetera? The list went on and on. And you know what, developing a clear roadmap to success was a real challenge because there was way too many unknowns. We essentially settled on organizing ourselves around two projects, one representing product development, the other one representing platform readiness. Our initial product focus was actually set on addressing key user pain points. So at the time, we had a real need for document collaboration, instant messaging, chat, to be able to communicate and collaborate in real time. That was our focus, and it was a very kind of a user adoption-centric product that we were focusing on. So it was SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams, essentially. The product development was actually really well informed by our pilots. And these pilots, again, were all on that separate cloud tenant. We realized, though, that one of the key foundational items on our platform we will need was ADFS. So we engaged SSC as well to kickstart that ADFS process, even in advance of the DCCP being in existence. Of course, around the GC space and industry, things were also evolving rapidly. You know, Microsoft was moving away from SharePoint towards a Teams focus. 365 products were evolving, and they're still constantly evolving rapidly. There's a lot of products that were finding their way to Canadian data centers, and a lot of ambiguity around that initially. TBS and SSC were starting to explore Microsoft 365 now as an enterprise service offering too. So just in terms of the overall global context. Another point is that from an international perspective, GAC launched a program and a project called the Virtual Mission Model. And this was a partnership with Shared Services Canada that aims to modernize our international footprint by leveraging cloud. This project would ensure that we have performance, the agility, security required to enable a positive international user experience. We've had tons of bandwidth and latency issues globally. And again, 365 and Teams, we knew was going to have a high demand. So we wanted to use that as kind of high watermark to be able to redesign or re-engineer the IMIT footprint internationally to meet the needs, not just of today, but of tomorrow. So last fiscal, so 2019 and 20, we went to GCRB and we got endorsement to work with SSC on a proof of concept. It's in 3 German missions, so Munich, Dusseldorf, and Berlin, to design and deploy a new cloud connectivity architecture that would enable effective international performance with a focus on basically Microsoft Teams. But if successful with this proof of concept, it'll really inform a broader deployment plan internationally, and it's something that we're looking to expand upon as part of that. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Can we go to the next slide, please? So boom, the pandemic hits. I don't think I need to talk too much to this crowd about the significant impact and catalyst for digital transformation that COVID represented, but it really, really drove the need to be able to collaborate and communicate remotely almost overnight. At first, the discussions, pre-COVID, we were talking about how do we get 10% of our user base to work from home? How can we make that happen? Now discussions are like, how can we get 10% of our user base back in the office? It's amazing how fast that transition happened. Right around that time too, Shared Services Canada partnered with Microsoft to launch GC collaboration as a platform. And what a game changer that was for us. So again, thank you, Microsoft, thank you, SSC, for that. That was really huge in terms of our digital adoption. GAC was an early adopter on that platform. I think we had over 10,000 users hopping on within a matter of a couple of weeks. Global users now were able to connect, communicate, and collaborate with their colleagues from anywhere at any time. This was a game changer. And while it was overwhelmingly positive, it wasn't without its challenges. For example, the GC collaboration platform offered no site architecture or minimal site architecture, and that limited the functionality and effectiveness of kind of the usability. We had to rapidly mobilize adoption, training, and support services as well. We had to pivot a bunch of our existing 365 resources now to focus on this new platform, which means that we are now living with two platforms, and it became kind of cumbersome kind of to go between two email systems and two calendaring solutions. But overall, the good definitely outweighed the bad in that respect. However, given that it was temporary, we now had to quickly mobilize a game plan, 6 months to migrate our 15,000 plus user or 14 to 15,000 users over to our official tenant by December 2020. And to do that was fairly Herculean effort, and there was a lot of challenges that stood in our path. So could I ask that we go to the next slide, please, Tyler? Thanks. So in terms of international considerations and challenges, there were many, many, many. I wanted to highlight a few here. First one being devices. So the people were used to a BYOD on GC Collab. We knew that wasn't going to be an option for Global Affairs tenant to achieve an ATO. So we had to work out some, crafty ways to allow people access to our departmental tenant. We did secure web access on personal devices. And we did BYOD with callback authentication. So this enabled people to at least connect, but we could connect in a managed way. So that was kind of the happy medium there. In terms of secure zones, that was another big gotcha for us, because we had, I think, 40% of people, worked within a secure zone, which means they had a device that was tethered to that secure zone, usually a desktop, and audio and video was disabled on that. So how are they going to collaborate and communicate? That was really challenging. To deal with that, we managed to enable the audio. It was a happy medium, but again, it made us have some tough questions in terms of our existing security policies and protocols, and kind of, have those questions in terms of how effective is that? Do we need to do that? What's that risk managed balance to allow people to work and get the tools they need to do their job while at the same time maintaining security due diligence? So we got the audio enabled. The physical security policy suite refresh is something that we're working actively now to try and update and make sure that it responds to the needs of our users. And we had some multi-factor authentication adjustments as well. So we can potentially go into that, or I won't go into that into too much detail, but if people have specifics, I can connect them with some of our technical folks downstream. In terms of network and infrastructure, like I mentioned, there's a high risk that the team's usage is going to saturate our network abroad. So a lot of things, split tunneling helped huge. Increasing bandwidth was something we had to expedite. We worked with SSC to do that, and we were able to increase bandwidth in some key areas. And then the third kind of piece is that virtual mission model architecture in Germany, with a view towards how can we take that and really expand it. And again, I won't go into too much detail on the virtual mission architecture. I just wanted to provide an overview. But if people are curious as to what we're looking at from an international architecture lens, I can probably reach out, and I'd be happy to set something up downstream. Could we go to the next slide, please? The case for E5. So like many other departments, GAC had to determine if the investment to E5 versus just straight up E3 or the E3++ was A, something that was needed, and B, if it's not, is it worth pursuing? What do we need to do? We performed a fulsome kind of cost benefit assessment on the case for E5. It came with, I think it's worth noting, and it came with a pretty heavy price tag, annual price tag for our departmental users. You're talking 15,000. I think it was somewhere in the range of just shy or just over $3 million a year. So, and that was I know GC's recently negotiated the E5 pricing, but this was pre-E5 pricing. This was last year. Again, I'm not going to go into the assessment details, but from an overview perspective, we did opt to proceed with procuring the E5 suite. I think we realized that the full package of functionality warranted kind of the investment. It'll go towards allowing us to achieve our Pbm ATO. Tons of security bells and whistles in there. It'll allow us to align with the Government of Canada's zero trust model, which is something we're actively trying to do, especially in the international context. And then lastly, it does enable enhanced automation, integration, and it contributes greatly to kind of a modern connected user experience. So things like analytics, Power BI, all of the telephony features, audio gave us audio conferencing, which we thought was a huge benefit, the data loss prevention, etc. We thought collectively this was a good investment for global affairs. And admittedly, we haven't kind of fully realized the complete potential of E5. That is something we're going to look to do in next year and the following year. But we're starting small, and we do have big plans to leverage a lot of the E5 functionality and get the most out of that investment. Additionally, part of the case for E5 was, let's take a strategic lens to how we can potentially offset some of the costs internally by looking at our legacy. As an example, Microsoft Defender could present opportunities for us to take a look at our McAfee from an endpoint device perspective and see if there's an opportunity to, eliminate one of those and reduce some costs from our legacy endpoint device solutions. Enterprise Teams audio conferencing adoption is going to help us move away from a lot of the legacy audio conferencing services that we currently have in place. There's a lot of other examples, but long story short, there is an opportunity for us to rationalize, and that's also, I have enterprise architecture under my belt, and that's key to our enterprise architecture is really trying to rationalize onto common platforms, and we have a great opportunity to do that when we take a look at our legacy complements. So that's something that is upcoming as well. And as our cloud foundation matures within global affairs, and as our 365 usage matures, we're going to expect, I think, to get more and more out of that E5 investment as we go. We go to the next slide, please, and thank you. So we're getting to the finish line here. This is, the heat was on. We knew we had 6 months to kind of mobilize. Given the sense of urgency, we decided to get off of GC collaboration. We decided to take our 2 projects and really streamline them into kind of one hyper-focused delivery team that focused on key streams like engagement and adoption, product readiness, platform readiness, support, and security. Our platform and product was branded as Signet E. So for those of you who are familiar with Global Affairs Canada, Signet and Midnet, those are the branding for our international network. So by adding the E, it was representative of an evolution of our international network, which is essentially what it is. That focused team maintained kind of a laser sharp focus on delivering an MVP, a minimum viable product consisting of Teams, SharePoint, and OneDrive. But really the goal or the focus was be able to provide a soft landing pad off of GC Collab onto our official Signet E tenant with a couple of key enhancements in mind, like the ability to manage PA info versus just unclassified, putting in at least a minimum viable product site architecture to help to align our usage more effectively, targeted coaching and support, and of course having single sign-on. And I think the biggest thing was being back to one corporate email and calendar. I found it really personally very difficult to juggle 2 calendars and 2 emails at the same time. It's kind of demoralizing being backed up by thousands of emails in one inbox, let alone having 2 to demoralize you. But it was very important as well that we focused a lot of our energies on that engagement and adoption lens. We found that kind of a key success factor was early and effective communications with the users. Luckily, we had a lot of experience through the pilots and through that GC collaboration experience to kind of hone our chops on the communications with the users. So that really facilitated. Of course, as I mentioned, we have Romika taking the lead on that, and she has a really deep in-depth knowledge of our organization and really helped to provide a good user experience and a good engagement with our user base. So another thing we did was we provided early access to our service desk and to our global network of IT professionals. Those are the boots in the ground that we have out there, and making sure that they were aware and up to date and could advocate on behalf of our product and of 365 was really critical to the success and to the adoption abroad. So that was another key component. We were able to achieve a PALL authority to operate as well. You'll see on the next slide that we have aspirations to get to a protected B. But we thought at a minimum this was a really, really good starting point, and we worked very closely with our IT security colleagues throughout the whole journey to ensure that they were on board and that we were doing a lot of security and privacy by design. It was definitely a rock and roll few months, but supported by kind of ample user engagement and a good comms plan, we were able to launch our MVP on December 14th. With minimal pain. We've heard a lot of great feedback in terms of, a general rollout or a general deployment usually has a lot more hiccups and technical issues than we experience with this. So, all intents and purposes, it was considered a huge success. On the virtual mission model front, we were also successful at piloting a new architecture design in Germany to enhance international performance. So now we're working with Shared Service Canada on how do we expand that, and that will be a subsequent GCRB presentation, I think, in the spring. But we have big plans on that front too.
Could I ask that we go to the next slide, please?
Thank you. So what's next for Global Affairs? Well, Signet E, Microsoft 365, along with D365, that's part of the broader Signet E platform that we have. We realize that has a ton of potential in terms of new products and enterprise scaling, kind of enterprise scale service offerings that we can support our users. In the coming year, we have a ton on our plate. We're going to focus our efforts in a number of different areas. One of which is going to be enhancing the product offerings. So we're looking at CRM solutions. We're looking at Power Apps, data and analytics, enhancing our collaboration products. We have a need for a lot of events in our department, and it's all virtual now. So it's how can we start to create an enterprise product and support for event management, as an example. Web content management is something that keeps coming up. How does Signet E factor now, or 365 factor into our web content management strategies? IM strategy. Huge component, that Signet E and role that Signet E is going to play in our IM evolution as well. So we're going to start to look at all those and tie them in. We're also going to work towards achieving our PBMM ATO. That's going to be a big effort. We need to prioritize Exchange hybrid. Right now, Global Affairs is not considered a yes department. We are a Stream 3 department. We do have a pretty significant business need for Exchange hybrid and starting to look at that. So we have access to the SSC playbook, and we're working to determine our readiness right now and make sure that we have all of our ducks in a row so that we're well positioned for the Exchange hybrid piece, because having an integrated email and calendar experience is going to be very critical for a positive user experience moving forward. But we're managing. We know a lot of departments are in the same boat as us. In terms of purpose-specific team evolution, let's talk about that for a second. So we wanted to create an input channel so that people can request team creation and be able to deploy teams and channels. So the MVP was rolled out based on a common site architecture that was roughly around our org structure. Now, if we have a need for a purpose-specific team to be created, we've created an intake channel through our service desk online to be able to triage that and to be able to action that as part of our support. So we're rolling that intake process out to users to request those teams and to be able to stand those teams up. We also need to scale up and stabilize our support efforts. I think it's important that one interesting bit about GAC is that we also support partner organizations and co-locators abroad, as well as other IMIT support for other tools. We need to work with our existing support structure to ensure that we have a coordinated approach and that we're scaling up our support function internally within the IMIT Bureau. We also recognize the possible chaos of SharePoint sprawl. We've always been aware of that. We're going to take a focus on kind of the architecture and IM policy and governance to ensure that we have that under control and then that's managed. Another key piece is we're planning to, and this is more of a digital adoption. So one of the key pillars of Global Affairs digital strategy is a digital workforce and digital service. And at the heart of that, it's really ensuring that the behavior and the user and the change management component of digital adoption and delivering digital services is brought to bear and is up front and center. So one of the ways we're going to do that is by trying to establish a community of digital champions that we can work to really understand some of the hurdles, the adoption hurdles and nuances of Signet E, some of the challenges to adopting it and using it, some of the areas and opportunities and new use cases. And those new use cases will allow us from adoption land to better partner and co-design and figure out where we should be investing our time and energies and moving this platform forward into the future. And those are going to lead to new business value, and it's going to lead to new enterprise solutions that can benefit many instead of few. So that's going to be a very key objective for us next fiscal year. We also want to evolve information management through auto classification. And of course, exploring the integration with GC docs. We're still early days on that, but we're going to work to kind of shore that up and put that onto the forward roadmap. And we're also going to look towards our app modernization program and link up with those guys to ensure that the impact of Signet E and the art of the possible and potential of Signet E is represented in our roadmap for all of our legacy applications. There's really an opportunity to align and rationalize capabilities and start to migrate and move things to this enterprise platform because it can do a lot. So all that to say, there's a lot from a Signet E perspective that we're going to focus our energies on now that we're post rollout. It is absolutely just the beginning. And from a virtual mission model perspective, we're going to be working with SSC to expand upon some of the successes of our proof of concept. And we're going to work on a global deployment plan as well from a networking and infrastructure perspective. So it's fun times ahead, lots on our plate. And again, it's just the beginning. So I think it's only a half an hour. I think we have lots of time for questions. Again, thank you very much for the opportunity to provide a bit of an overview of what we're aspiring to do and the journey thus far for 365. And I hope you found it valuable. And with that, so then I'll hand it over to you. I don't know if there's been a lot of questions, but maybe we can go through some of those.
Great. Thank you, Julian. Let's get you to mute first. I'm getting some feedback. There we go. Yeah, thank you for a great presentation. You did an awesome job summarizing what would be a complex project into a very streamlined presentation. For the audience, I know there's a lot of people out there that probably have some questions. So now is the time, if you haven't already, get your questions into the sidebar on the Teams live. We have plenty of time to start this. Sorry. What's up, Barry? To start this conversation around what Global Affairs is doing. I know from my experience talking to many departments that are on the same journey to the cloud, there's a lot of eyes on Global Affairs, just based upon your size, the complexity, given the international components that you have to deal with. So as we wait for some questions to come in, Julian, I know you have a little bit more information around your case for moving to E5. Is that something that you think we can talk about as we let some questions roll in?
Absolutely. It's unfortunate. I actually have a deck that we used. It's too bad I couldn't kind of augment that with some visuals, but I can certainly speak to a lot of it.
I think it's in the deck. If we go to the next slide.
There's actually a few in the annex. Very good question. Very good point.
I don't know if we want to go to the next one.
Yeah, do you see that? There we go.
So this is something that, if we're looking at ingress, egress internationally, how do we leverage the internet? How do we leverage third-party cloud? Given the fact that we're on a Government of Canada network, these are all big, very hairy discussions. And I think, a lot of it, and I'm preaching to the choir here, but a lot of our cloud journey and how we're securing cloud has to do with kind of endpoint security, has to do with, identity and trusted identity. And we know Government of Canada is moving towards a zero trust model, and that's the best practice. We would like, through our virtual mission model project, to explore how we can evolve that space, understanding that, conditional access, Azure AD, the Microsoft information protection, the Microsoft Cloud App Security, all of these bells and whistles are, and Azure Sentinel, obviously, all of these are key tools in allowing us to work and implement a zero trust model. So we're still early days on that, but we know that the potential is there through MS365 to really leverage that. And we've stood up a dedicated cyber ops team as well within the IMIT Bureau that is going to be looking at that specifically. And as part of the Virtual Mission Model project, we also are working closely with CCCS and Shared Services Canada as well to see how we can take an enterprise lens to that. So we can go to the next slide. So the Pbm Profile, in this case, what we did was we tried to map the E3 and E5 functionality to the security control families and categories so that it would help to bolster our case, essentially. This is what we put together to kind of make a case for, if we have E5, here's what we can accomplish. Does this position us better for PB? Does it not? From this lens, we looked at the GC guardrails. So a lot of it was managing identity and access management, applying control, conditional access control policies. All of these with, E3, with the E5 suite, we were able to address. If not, we probably would have been struggling to get that PBMM. And we know that the picture is a little bit more clear now in terms of what is actually required. And there's been a lot of crystallization of the PBMM in 365 lens in the recent year. When we did this, keep in mind it was a year and a half ago. I think a lot of people we've advanced this space a lot more in the last year and a half. But at this time, we just took a kind of cursory lens over the GC guardrails and did a mapping, and we determined that, having the, Microsoft Defender, having the E5, all of those things were going to be a huge complement to us being able to achieve that PBMM. Go to the next slide, please. Okay, so that's just, again, more of the logging and monitoring CASB solution, perform service hardening, device hardening. All of the E5 bells and whistles are going to be very complementary towards us being able to satisfy those security controls. Next slide. And next slide. There's a lot of PBMM security controls. So this one was really interesting for us. So it's about that modern user experience. So we really tried to take a lens in terms of what can E5 give us to help provide a modern digital experience for our users? Because this is really where I think the heart of, aside from the PBMM, and I think we could have achieved PBMM with just an E3++, but I think this is where it provided a bit of the tipping scale in terms of us really pushing for E5. So if we take analytics as an example, like that Power BI for all staff, again, it's another potential replacement of a legacy system. That integration and automation that provides, and the fact that we can have automated, secure analysis of personal productivity, all that stuff, is something we had on our radar. To be able to do it as part of this common platform was just going to be a win-win for us, and we actually save money in terms of getting rid of some of our legacy. So information management, obviously, We know GC Docs is the official document management repository. We do see this being very complementary as well. We see SharePoint playing a big role in how we're managing our information and a big role in the evolution of information. It's going to factor very heavily into GAC's upcoming information management strategy and roadmap. And we knew that E5 was going to contribute to that, in terms of automated labeling, classification, information protection, automated data leak, loss prevention, the DLP. We knew that was going to be a key component. Office and Windows updates automatically, that's just a model change, but we think it's very important to move towards cloud services. It takes a lot of, from a patch management, from an updates perspective, it takes a lot of heavy lifting out of departments now, because these things are very kind of self-updating, which we see a lot of benefit from a user experience as well. And, personally, I love the fact that there's all kinds of new solutions and functionality being added. And now having E5 means we're not going to miss out on anything. From a security lens, I think we already covered that. There's just a ton of security bells and whistles in the E5 package that we felt it was great. And from the collaboration lens, I think audio conferencing was a big piece for us. Oddly enough, that was a user requirement that kept coming up a lot in our GC collaboration. A lot of people are just tied to this concept of having an audio conference. We kept hearing it over and over again. And this provides us kind of a lot more flexibility by having that audio conferencing solution in place. So that's great as well. We're going to be looking at kind of the role of E5 and 365 in general as part of our overall telephony strategy moving forward too. So, I don't know if anybody has any specific questions on this, but again, I'm happy to potentially share our more fulsome deck with folks. The other piece, of course, was that cost benefit analysis, and it was pricey. I think we're going to get do the new renegotiated contracts going to be a little bit more digestible for GAC next year. So thank you to those involved in the negotiation. So far, we do see the potential in this, and we're looking forward to investing in it more and more. And I'd actually ask if there's future discussions at this council on E5 and how people are actually leveraging and maximizing that investment. I would love to hear some of that and some of the other experiences from other departments.
Great, thanks, Julian. That was just enough detail to get the questions rolling in. So we have quite a few questions here that we can kind of work through. So question from Mark Armstrong. Any thoughts on your official information management solution going forward, aka GC Docs versus SharePoint? Have you started to think about this at GAC?
First of all, hi, Mark. Yes, this is going to be something that's incorporated as part of our broader information management strategy and roadmap that we're developing right now. We are still working towards GC Docs, because unless we've heard otherwise, GC Docs is our de facto standard for document management. So we have that on the horizon. I think right now our approach with IM and 365 is to architect it in such a way, and we've actually added Cogniva C3 as an auto classification tool. It'll give us a kind of a modular approach that will allow us to integrate more effectively with GC Docs downstream. If the decision is made that SharePoint does become an official document management solution, we will consider that at that time, and I'm sure that'll factor into our forward plans as well. But right now, we're still aligning with GC Docs.
I'll step in just to make everyone, it's Barry Doucette speaking. So just let everyone know that on February 16th, we're doing a case study, EDRMS on M365 E5 Protected B, and it's for IRB. So we'll send out an invitation to everybody. It's an Orangutech seminar, not the council meeting, but just FYI to everybody online here. You'll get an invitation if you'd like to attend. Thanks.
Thanks, Barry, and thanks, Julian, for that answer. Now, quick question here. Is Global Affairs providing Teams to users on their mobile devices or just on laptops?
Yes, we are providing it to mobile devices. It is on using corporate mobile devices, and we're doing that service that's a service that's provided by through Shared Services Canada. It's enabled through Shared Services Canada.
Okay, Perfect. I think there might be some technical difficulties in hearing my questions, but hopefully they can hear your answers. Can you talk a little bit more about how you went from developing your roadmap and then how you're continuing to evolve it? So business and or technical. Did you enlist external help or was it purely internal GAC employees?
You know, we've been on this journey for a long time, and we had brought in some expert help, and I think the value add there was from more of a technical alignment perspective versus an actual business alignment. From a business alignment perspective, we knew where the pain points were, and the pain points were in document collaboration, were in the ability to connect and communicate effectively with each other abroad. We wanted to provide that great tool. We had some forward roadmaps. They were all very centered initially on that. We knew email wasn't going to be a consideration for us in the near future. So we focused our energies on kind of the heavy user adoption pieces like SharePoint. Our initial product development was around SharePoint, Teams, and OneDrive. Eventually, that just became, with COVID, that changed everything, right? So we had all our roadmaps that were kind of put on hold. And COVID happened, and then our new minimum viable product had to align with the experience that they were getting on GC collaboration and making sure that we were able to replicate and give them a good experience on our own departmental tenant. So that really focused our energies for that first release. Now we're having those questions about, okay, well, let's get the road mapping band back together and see from a capabilities lens where we need to focus our energies. So we're doing that exercise right now, and we know enough to be dangerous. We're kind of aligning the suite of 365 to business capabilities. We're going to look at it from a context of an app modernization program that is currently in flight. We just finished our discovery phase. Now we're into the planning phase within global affairs. So we're going to be taking a look at our existing legacy applications. We have 300 to 400. And looking at them from a business capability lens and saying, okay, well, is there a soft landing spot on Signet E? Is there an enterprise product on Signet E that would map to this particular legacy? Is this an option to replatform this and to decommission that application? That's a big piece of work that's doing. That's underway right now. Another strategy we're taking is we have a lot of feedback and intake channels with our users. So we're really trying to understand those use cases that keep percolating up that seem to fall outside of our existing supported product suite, our minimum viable product, and really create that channel so we can work with them to unpack that and see if there's an opportunity to roll that into the mothership of Signet E as an enterprise solution. So that's another kind of more tactical channel that we're working with to understand what the user needs are and make sure that it's a user-centric approach to the products that we're bringing into light as part of this platform. So hopefully that answered your question a little bit.
Perfect, yes. Oh, some feedback again. Switching gears a little bit, has Global Affairs considered skipping Exchange Hybrid and going right to Exchange Online? Now you're on mute, Julian. There we go.
Somebody mute me. Okay. Yeah. Yes, we think about that. There's discussions about it. Right now, I think the game plan is okay. So first of all, part of the challenge is we have a lot of Exchange servers internationally that we need to contend with. So there's a bit of a rationalization question that's also included as part of this. Next year, we're hoping to mobilize a email migration centric project within Global Affairs to be able to do that assessment. Of course, the big dependency and caveat is SSE's ability to factor us into the equation to be able to have those negotiations and come up with that plan. So we have dedicated people on the SSC side that are just there to handle the Exchange services for the international component. They're not involved in DCCP to my knowledge. And I think what we need to do is be able to get everybody in the room together, those service lines, and come up with a game plan for how we're going to address it. And moving to the cloud would definitely be one of those options we'd be looking at. From what I understand, some of the early discussions were we're leaning towards Exchange hybrid being the path of least resistance as opposed to going to cloud. But I know that's a question that comes up, I'd say, every week. So it's something that's on our radar, and we're going to look at more fulsomely next year.
Right. Thanks, Julian. Switching gears again and probably moving into more of a post-COVID roadmap, question from Matthew at TBS. So given the scope, the international scope of global affairs, have you given any consideration to if, how, or when you may integrate teams into your boardrooms for further VC enablement when obviously we're back in the office?
It is a known issue. I think to date, we've been able to document a bit about our current state and a bit of what our foreseeable need is. We know that this will be a need as we go back. In fact, I had a discussion on that, road mapping discussion about that capability this morning. So it's on our radar. I think it's not on our priority focus for, I would say, Q1, Q2 of next year, but we're going to need to start to unpack that space. And I think there's an opportunity as part of our virtual mission model project to take a kind of a video conferencing use case, because it does involve a lot of the hardware components, the device components. There's a governance, there's a process issue that we have to unpack as part of that. And maybe we can attack that use case onto one of our virtual mission model international projects to be able to unpack that and then hopefully come up with a reusable solution that we can share with the rest of the world. The other challenge with that is that every mission is probably going to have its own unique gotchas and challenges that we'll have to contend with too, in terms of their audio and video conferencing needs.
All right. And a second question from Matthew at Treasury Board. Considering, again, the broad reach of global affairs, have you considered including Yammer in your Microsoft 365 journey as a digital communications and collaboration platform?
Yeah, we're actually working with our comms folks on that. So Yammer is something that is going to be included as part, or is in scope for inclusion as part of our next release, if you can call it a release, or our MVP2. So we're going to be lighting that up hopefully by the end of this fiscal year as well. But we want to make sure that it's used to its maximum benefit. So we're working with our colleagues in comms to be able to do that. But yeah, absolutely, we see a lot of potential for that.
Great. Now a question regarding the E3 versus E5 is coming from Richard at PSC. PSC debated going to E5 or sticking with E3. Should they expect a more complicated path to M365 if they stick with E3 in regards to the IT security requirements?
Well, you know what? A lot of it, I think, comes down to the skill sets and your capacity to be able to leverage E5. One of the things, like in hindsight, if you're just looking at it from a security lens, I think, polling and doing some consultation with other departments, especially those who've been able to do kind of the E3++, might be a good avenue to take to start with, to truly understand. Like we did our cursory mapping of the GC guardrails against kind of the benefits of E5. I think you could take a similar approach with taking a look at the E3++ package and see what that minimum viable security due diligence is necessary to support the risk threshold of your department and be able to go with that. I would start with that before leaning in saying, oh, E5 first, and then kind of assessing down. Let's start with E3 and let's take a look at how we can augment that through the E3++ to be able to get you to where you need to be. And you may end up coming to the determination that it's, and especially with the new renegotiated pricing, you may come to the determination that you're getting more bang for your buck by going with the whole E5. But I'd be happy to have a separate discussion with you and your department if you like, just to kind of unpack some of those questions.
Thanks, Julian. And I'm sure that's not just PSC. I know that's a big topic of conversation for a lot of departments, is this E3 versus E5 and the add-on packs and security and all that. So I'm sure we could do a presentation just on that. And I know in the past we have, but things have evolved since then. Question from Alain. Any considerations to apply enterprise IM and business context to M365 objects within the M365 using capabilities such as compliance center records and info governance, content types, labels, etc., third-party tools, rather than integrate into GC docs? And Barry, I know you wanted to touch on this one as well.
Yeah, I did earlier, and unfortunately it seemed like my voice wasn't coming through, the first question on GC docs, and I just posted something there so that everyone can see it. Julian or Savannah, if you could mute, would be great. So Orangutech is having a seminar on February 16th, Tuesday, couple of weeks from now. It's called IRB, a case study, EDRMS on M365. It'll be around E5 and protected B, in which a lot of these questions will be asked, Alain. So if you'd like to attend, we will be sending out an invitation tomorrow to everyone on the council, and you'll be able to go to our website and register. So if we're implementing now, it's quite an interesting subject, and love to have everyone chat and listen through it. Thanks.
Thanks, Barry.
And I guess further to that is, you know, I think those are exactly the things that we are kind of exploring and unpacking now. And as we take a look at kind of how our evolution of IM, we're going to be having those conversations a lot more in the next year.
Perfect. We have a few more minutes left here. Hopefully a couple of these questions are quick ones. Do you have a suggested migration tool from file shares to SharePoint Online? No.
Nothing that I recommend. I would be happy to put you into contact with some of our IM product folks who are working on this, though, to have that discussion. They might have some ideas in terms of where they're leaning.
Right, and I know a lot of departments are looking at AvePoint as a tool for migration as well. Another question regarding tools. ROT analysis tools, suggestions?
Not off the top of my head. Again, I'm happy to go back. I'm gonna, you know, I can consult with our analytics folks and see if they have any recommendations. So let me know who you are, and I'm happy to reach out. Not off the top of my head.
And then also, how about MFA and external sharing?
Oh, external sharing is something that we really need. It's a huge actually use case within global affairs. Right now we can do external meetings and we can do external chats and we can bring people into group discussions externally as guests, like guest access. We're very hopeful with the promise of GC Exchange, which was brought up to, I think, at the CIO, somewhere at GCRB. I think it was at GCRB this week. They were talking about GC Exchange. To be able to collaborate between interdepartmental tenants. But, you know, our folks in global affairs, the trade, consular services, they do a lot of work with external parties, and that's kind of a key requirement for them. So as part of the evolution of Signetti, we're going to be looking at how we can make that a little bit more of a robust, you know, external sharing solution for them. Right now, there's kind of guest access, and they're able to connect to our tenant and attend meetings and things like that, but they're unable to share. Like Silvana wasn't able to share a document with me today. So that's something that's on our radar, but we haven't fully unpacked yet. But it is a use case for sure.
Thank you, Julian. And thank you for everyone who submitted questions. We did make it through majority of questions that got asked and voted for. So I just wanted to thank you again, Julian, for the great presentation and for everyone who jumped in on this conversation. This is what this community is all about. We're setting it up for you so that we can share and really learn from each other's use cases. So as I mentioned, we do present office. Sorry, Barry, you're gonna have, or Julian, you'll have to mute. There we go. We do have these council meetings at the end of every month. Like I said at the beginning, we are hoping to have ISED presenting at the end of February. So details to follow on that one. And we look forward to another year of council meetings, and hopefully, fingers crossed, maybe we can be back in person at some point, but if not, we will continue to host them here live on Teams. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great rest of your afternoon. Bye, guys.
Thank you,